The video you're about to watch is going to blow your mind. A vast majority of those who come into this channel to take in videos are very knowledgeable on Kenyan politics. But after today, I guarantee you, you will not look at Kenyan politics the same way again, ever. Why am I doing this video now? Because many Kenyans are very hopeful that the Sisi Sifuna movement will be swept into power for real change in Kenya and for the swamp to be drained. A totally new chapter for the country called Kenya. And I want to make it very clear that I'm not giving you this information to burst your bubble. No, information is power because it helps you to fight in the right way, to identify the real targets and the decoys designed to keep you very busy while your enemy easily achieves the objectives. Bila kizungu mingi, the Sisi Sifuna movement, the Sifuna presidential candidature, is going to be blocked and very effectively neutralized unless we do something about it. Yes, you and I can stop it. But for us to do that, we need first of all to understand. And today I'm going to give you homework for the first time. Those who love the motherland and want a better Kenya. Once you understand, it is your duty to make as many fellow Kenyans as possible to understand. It is your duty as a patriotic Kenyan. You can start off by sharing this video in forums and where you can reach people you know, who trust you. Now, we said in an earlier video that it is very naive for anybody to believe that something that they have not seen does not exist. Something that does not have physical evidence does not exist. And we gave the example of electricity. Nobody has seen it, but we see its power and its effect, good and bad, in our lives every day. That is how the powerful in politics, and especially in Kenyan politics, operate. This is important to emphasize yet again and re-emphasize, because I sense there are some of us taking in this video who still don't believe, or they're 50-50 over the existence of the deep state. And in this video, I'll avoid using deep state and instead call them the powerful. But to convince further those who are 50-50, today I'm going to give you physical evidence of the existence of the powerful. They sometimes operate like the snake. You have not seen the snake, but this fascinating creature sometimes leaves behind its skin. It regularly sheds its skin. So you see a piece of skin and you know, uh-oh, you're in trouble. Because finding it is never easy. During the 2022 presidential elections, the most recent presidential elections, 2 pieces of physical evidence were dropped right on our laps. And don't be ashamed that you missed it, because I too initially completely missed it, with all my experience and knowledge. And before you understand this evidence, I need to give you some information which you may not have. Usually, the deep state, the powerful, are very closely linked with major foreign intelligence communities. Anyway, these pieces of evidence are very easy to verify because you can go back and check for yourself if you don't believe. Shortly before the 2022 presidential elections were announced, a major Western power issued an alert to its citizens. Be very careful in Kisumu. Avoid completely Kondele and the Kibra slums. Now, we all knew that Raila Odinga was going to finally win the presidency. I mean, we voted. We know how our friends voted. We knew he was the winner. So this was a very strange, bizarre advisory, caution you had to citizens of that country. I'm sure you see that this can only mean one thing. There are some people, the powerful people, already knew the results which were going to be announced, which is strange because it is only the IEBC who are supposed to know. Piece of evidence number 2. just before the Supreme Court announced its judgment, over a petition against the election of Ruto as president, yet another advisory came through. And this one I saw very early, and I saw with my own eyes. I was at this NGO when it came through. Please park all vehicles before 2 p.m. No movements of vehicles after 2 p.m. Cancel all engagements, cancel all appointments, etc., etc. Especially after the 2017 verdict, Maraga's court, that overturned the election of Uhuru. Most analysts were sure Ruto's election was going to be nullified. Some people were even already preparing for a repeat election. But here was this advisory, and you know the rest of the story. I rest my case. Now let's dive into the meat so that we totally understand this thing. But before that, please take a quick moment to like this video if you're already enjoying it, and also consider subscribing if you're not yet a subscriber. And a special message for those regulars on this channel who never miss a single Kumekucha Chris video. I have a very pleasant surprise for you towards the tail end of my show today. It is definitely worth your while. I guarantee it. Right, let's dive in. And let us start by looking at this in the eyes of the powerful, how they see it, so that we understand their actions and the way they think. There is evidence that they really started paying attention after the Nakuru rally, the Nakuru Sisi rally, which was packed. I am guessing this caused some very powerful people to have a sudden urge to visit the restroom. Oh yes, you see, the human body is very interesting. And I'm certain all of us have had that experience. Why did Nakuru cause this reaction? Well, number one, it confirmed that the Sisi Sifuna is a mass movement, and mass movements, right from the grassroots, are very difficult to deal with. Number two, it confirmed that the Sisi Sifuna is tribeless. And number three, they could not believe that the vast majority of people attending that rally were members of the House of Mumbi. They could not believe that one. And I guess one of the reasons is because they do not have the following information. Members of the House of Mumbi, their DNA has a crazy survival instinct. The survival instinct of this Kenyan community is just off the charts. I mean, our Gikuyu ancestors survived the colonial government, the brutal colonial government. They survived the excesses of their own Jomo Kenyatta. They survived Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. They are surviving and even thriving the Ruto regime. And to be clear, they also greatly thrived during the colonial era, despite the challenges, and also during the Moi era, when he completely finished the coffee industry because he saw them as a threat, and other industries that bigwigs in the community were relying on. Even when that happened, they found new industries and they thrived. Let me give you a quick example. One day, do some research on how Kenya very suddenly became a major horticultural products exporter. And our current survival instinct as the Gikuyu is that the swamp must be drained, and that the vehicle of survival is Sisi Sifuna, even for us, as it is for the rest of Kenyans. Usicheze na hiyo survival instinct kwa DNA za ndugu na dada zetu. Anyway, there was also another shocker shortly after that, although this one did not have such a big impact like Nakuru, and that is the Kisumu Sisi Sifuna rally. Because the people who specialize in giving people fake news, propaganda, and false perceptions had succeeded in convincing most, including some in the deep state, including some powerful people, They managed to convince them that Luo Nyanza was 50-50. There was a lot of support there for the other side. That Ndoto ya Mchana came crashing down very hard during the Kisumu Sisi Sifuna rally. And so the next burning question is, what are they going to do to stop us, to stop Sisi Sifuna, to stop the vast majority of the long-suffering Kenyans? That is why I said us. Let us look at what they did in the past, what they have done in the past. In the 90s, the powerful decided that they had had enough of Moi and that Moi must go. And therefore, the first step they took was to start heavily financing many NGOs to educate Kenyans on why Moi must go. They heavily financed the opposition, and they even financed opposition publications like Finance Magazine. Remember? And they succeeded big time, because in 1991, Moi was forced to repeal Section 2A, which meant that the country called Kenya went back into multi-party politics. Because before that, it was a dictatorship where the only political party was KANU, and you are not allowed to run as an independent candidate in any election in the country, legally so. I want us to understand that for Moi to get to that place where he accepted multi-party democracy back to Kenya, it took a lot of work, a lot of pressure by the powerful. Because before that, Moi had sworn in public. Multi-party, Moi said, over my dead body. He had told Kenyans that. It was very clear. Before we continue, let's reference back to the present. We have seen some very powerful bloggers pushing the idea of Sifuna as a deputy to one of those wazees. That idea is being pushed very aggressively. In my opinion, it is definitely being financed. Something else, they're also pushing very hard the idea that if the opposition do not unite and present one candidate to face President Ruto in 2027, Ruto will win. Ruto will come back. That is an idea they're pushing very aggressively. And in my opinion, it is not true. It would be true if Ruto was Uhuru Kenyatta. It would be very true. Okay, without a single candidate, we would lose. The rest of Kenya would lose. And of course, it would be very true if Ruto was Moi, operating under the old constitution. But under our current circumstances, no, it is definitely not true. We do not need one candidate to face Ruto to win. We don't. And the good news is that the long-suffering people of Kenya already have a forum where they can choose the single candidate they want and completely ignore any boardroom arrangements, and everything will be okay. And that forum, of course, is the internet, online community. So back to 1992, Moi faced a united opposition called Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, heavily financed by the powerful. Now, this is where people get confused, yeah? So I'll try to slow down and go step by step so that I don't lose anybody. The initial plan of the powerful was to have the single opposition candidate called Emilio Stanley Moi Kibaki, yeah, face Moi and defeat him in those 1992 elections. Now, older Kenyans will remember that at the beginning of Ford, it was difficult to imagine any of the leading lights in Ford becoming president. Maybe Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, very experienced, founding father of the nation. Maybe Jaramogi. Ken Matiba was just a popular politician from Kiharu. Yeah, I believe the constituency was called Mbiri in those days. On the surface of things, nothing more than that. And so the bombshell is that the powerful were on the same side with Moi as far as dismantling Ford was concerned. Dismantling the united opposition who were under the umbrella of Ford. In other words, Moi and the powerful were on opposite sides. But as far as dealing with Ford, Forum for Restoration of Democracy was concerned, they were on the same side. And I believe it is the powerful who identified the late Masinde Muliro as the glue holding all the different politicians with different ideologies together under the Ford umbrella. In case you didn't know, is the one who was negotiating financing for Ford. Because on his last trip back to Kenya, where did he come from? He had come from a meeting, and we were told officially, he had come from a meeting to raise funds for Ford. We were told that in black and white. And maybe today we are going to solve a mystery that has been in existence for decades. What exactly happened to Masinde Muliro? After his meeting abroad, it was his financiers who organized his flight back to Kenya, and they chose British Airways. And therefore it is these financiers who had all the information on his travel arrangements, seat number, arrival time, departure time, etc., etc. It is also these financiers, these powerful people, who had the technology to interfere with the pacer which Masinde Muliro wore to control his heartbeat. We are sure that technology was not available locally in the country called Kenya, enabling Moi and Biwott, who was on the same British Airways flight, to use the same against Masinde Muliro. It is the financiers, the foreigners, who had the technology. And you know, these people always cover their tracks. And therefore I would not be surprised that they had something to do with the fact that Nicholas Biwott, very close to Moi, was on the same flight as Masinde Muliro. Why? So that if people start being suspicious, everybody will point at Nicholas Biwott. And that is exactly what happened. And so the powerful succeeded in dismantling the mighty united Ford opposition. Fast forward to the present. Let us be very careful about the glue that is holding Sisi Sifuna together. I don't know what it is. I have no idea what it is. But let us be very careful that it is not an individual. I suspect it is not an individual. It is the people of Kenya. And therefore, this time round, it will be a bit more complicated to deal with the mass movement called Sisi Sifuna. Back again to 1992. I found it super fascinating at the time that the KANU party, in the run-up to the presidential elections, focused on only one opposition presidential candidate, which was Mwai Kibaki. The reason why I found that strange is because, in my opinion, Mwai Kibaki was not popular enough to win the presidency. And in any case, in the analysis of my late political lecturer, which was rarely wrong, the Murima vote was going to be divided. And so Kibaki was going to end up with only Nyeri. Matiba would go with Muranga. And Kiambu and the diaspora Kikuyu would be divided between the two candidates. So why focus on Kibaki only? There can only be one answer. Moi and his handlers and the intelligence community in Kenya had identified Kibaki as the choice of the powerful, as the candidate, the powerful, who wanted Moi gone out, was sponsoring. Incidentally, some of the full-page ads in the nation's smear campaign against Kibaki included what Kibaki had said in the past in moving the motion to make Kenya legally a one-party state in parliament. I believe that smear campaign against Kibaki had very little effect because Kenyans were very fed up with Moi. So what happened in that election? So that the powerful were defeated. They are really defeated. What happened so that they were defeated? Actually, some very interesting things. Remember, in those days, all you needed to become president of Kenya was a simple majority. You will remember that 15 years later in the future, Mwai Kibaki won by about 200,000 votes, allegedly, in 2007. And so I'm guessing the calculations of the powerful was a simple majority for Mwai Kibaki. I believe their major miscalculation in those elections was that they forgot that Murima people, how Pangwingi, okay, they are never organized and put in compartments the way you want. Never ever. And so in those elections, shockingly, Kenneth Matiba happened. The man came from nowhere and he won massive votes right across Murima. That was the first thing that frustrated the Kibaki plan. Because looking at the election results, if Kibaki had managed to get a sizable amount of the votes that went to Matiba, he would have won. And I'm certain that the powerful already had a plan in place to force Moi out after his defeat in those elections, and most probably to take him to jail. What about 1997? How were the powerful defeated? Moi outsmarted them, pure and simple. You know, one of the big problems they had is that they really underestimated Moi, because there is this belief amongst many Kenyans and even Vasungu that if somebody cannot speak Queen's English or the English language fluently, they are not that intelligent. That is the mistake they made with Moi. Now, the interesting thing to note with 2002 is that if the unified presidential candidate of the opposition was Raila Odinga, Uhuru Kenyatta would have won. Okay, let's get that right. Indeed, if the candidate had been anybody else but Mwai Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta would have won in 2002. And please don't get confused. The powerful have options. The powerful have fallback plans. These are very serious people. And it is also true that in 2022, had the candidate not been Raila Odinga, and instead maybe Kalonzo Musyoka, Ruto would not have won. There are always those candidates the powerful do not want anywhere near the presidency. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Raila Odinga, Edwin Sifuna, etc., etc. And what is special about these candidates that they are not wanted? They are populist. They can get the masses to do things. They can move the masses in a certain direction. That is a huge threat to the objectives, the plans, the businesses of the powerful. Now, if the masses of Kenya do not intervene, there are only two things that can happen going forward. Two crazy things. And I will share that in great detail immediately after fulfilling the promise I made earlier on my show today. Now, everybody knows we have the World Wide Web and then we have the dark web, secretive, etc., etc. We also have Kumekucha Chris public channel and Kumekucha Chris highly sensitive videos and information. And the easiest way to access all this information, past, present, and future, is by getting something called the golden key. And we have some people who have the golden key and therefore enjoy this highly sensitive information that is not available to the public or even in this public channel. It includes my weekly intelligence briefings and my highly sensitive special reports focused on certain topics. For example, the Cyrus Njirongo assassination, oh yes it was, the General Ogola assassination, the Raila assassination, etc., etc. How it was done, who did it, step by step, very detailed. Now, ordinarily, getting the golden key is a very pricey issue, even in this very difficult economy. But now you can get it with literally mandazi money, thanks to the intervention of a sponsor. And you can trigger that sponsor today. All you have to do is to order 2 Kumekucha classics, Dark Secrets of the Kenyan Presidency, an ebook, and then my classic video documentary, Mboya, It Was More Than an Assassination, very detailed. For example, did you know that there were 2 gunmen at the scene? Confirmed information from eyewitnesses. And these 2 classics will cost you only Kenya shillings 777. You can see details on your screens right now. And this will immediately trigger the sponsor. And I'll be able to give you the golden key to give you access to everything sensitive that is Kumekucha. Please move with speed. This offer is coming to an end at any time. All you have to do is to M-Pesa 777 or PayPal $6 to that email address you see. All the details are right in front of you. Please move with speed to avoid regret later. Right? Because the Kenyan voter is very much aware of a lot of things, what is most likely going to happen is that Sifuna will join the Wazés after all. But in joining the Wazés, he will be protected by the masses, which means Sifuna, and by extension the masses, will retain power somehow, even with the Wazés there. But bottom line, that will be a losing strategy. I don't think it will be possible to drain the swamp under those circumstances. Possibility number 2, Sifuna goes it alone and wins the presidency. And Sisi Sifuna, the mass movement, is swept into power. Believe it or not, there'll still be a problem. Because the powerful can simply execute a John F. Kennedy. What is that, Chris? Well, in the 60s, a populist president, John F. Kennedy, was elected. And he had chosen, for the sake of stability, this mzee from the establishment. Just the kind of character to have links with the deep state. Just the kind of character, even if he did not have prior links to the deep state. Just the kind of character, kuingizwa box haraka, after the fact. And so what this means, and this is very important, is that the running mate of Edwin Sifuna in that kind of scenario has to be another Sifuna, or the perfect replacement to Sifuna. That will be the only way to avoid a John F. Kennedy, and keep the president, in that case, safe. For the simple reason that removing Sifuna would not change anything. And by the way, that is a very tall order. Well, fellow Kenyans, we have a hell of a fight ahead of us. Yes, it is very difficult, but please don't give up. Don't give up. Don't even think of giving up. All for a better Kenya, and doing only that which can stand the test of time. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.